Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the George. There are many pubs called the George and Dragon and other things in Chai, so we're at home. I'm Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist, playwright and non-fiction writer, and have the great good fortune to do these pre-show interviews, and I'm delighted to be here with Joanna Bowman, who was the assistant director on the production of Yer Heart Out that was here in 2019 and is now here as the director, the revival director, which is fabulous. So that deserves a round of applause, I think. So, Jo, we're sitting here at 7:30 tonight. The Lionesses are going to play. Yeah. We're in a World Cup year. Yeah. I like football, I'm just saying, before you all think I've just been boning up on this. And we had, of course, the World Cup. Mm-hmm. This play was written in 2002, and then it was been performed at other moments, and then it was performed here in 2019. Mm-hmm. So 20 years since this play was written. How much has changed? Tell us a bit about the play and how...
Yeah, it's funny. I remember there was a line in a review last time which said, it's rare to go to the theatre and to hope that it has become less relevant, or that the sort of social circumstance that you're in means that the play has feels like a period piece or a historic piece. And the thrust of the review was that really isn't what's happened at all. And I think that is really much the case. So the play is set in an England-Germany qualifying football match, and over the course of the play, the sort of attitudes towards nationalism and racism and sort of what it is to be particularly English come out. And yeah, it's really interesting revisiting it both 20 years after it was first written, but also 3 years later than we did the production first time round. And actually it resonates just as sort of loudly and clearly as it did last time. In fact, perhaps even more so. We were talking just before we came in about sort of the abuse that people like Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling have faced over the last year or so, and actually not that much really has changed since the play was A, written, and B, first performed here. So I think unfortunately it's just as sort of important and I think in some ways speaks louder to 2022 than it did to 2019, which was a bit of a shock when we got into the rehearsal room and sort of rediscovered that.
Yes, because in a way, the pandemic and some of the very ugly behaviour that we saw around the Men's World Cup, it feels actually less tolerant than maybe it did in 2019, because I think people have battened down the hatches in a way.
Absolutely, and I think sort of the public conversation around nationalism and race has sort of happened in a more open way than it might have done in 2019. So actually, you might come and see this play having had different conversations already than we might have done in 2019. I think things like Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and what happened in 2020 can only make this play sort of sing louder and maybe more in a sort of global context as well. It is very specifically about Englishness, but it speaks to how people conceive of nationhood around the world, I think.
And it's also about people finding their tribe, wanting to belong to something, even if they become uncomfortable with the behaviour of the group of people they're in with. So do you want to say a little bit about that, about how you manage that tribalism? Because it's a wonderful company, and I think it's 10 of the original 14 are back. Yes. It's amazing. But it's quite hard, isn't it, when you have difficult subject matter, because that can bleed over into people's normal relationships. So how do you manage the kind of the turn of the screw, I suppose, which is what happens in the play?
Yeah, it's interesting that. I think all good productions rely on a sense of sort of ensemble and company, and it's essential for this play because for two reasons. First of all, it's about a pub football team who have come in having just played a game together. So we have a very explicit sort of need for the team in the play. And second, because as you say, there are really difficult upsetting questions asked in the play. And actually it feels sort of essential that the company can hold that together and actually be able to look at each other at the curtain call at the bow and say, yeah, we got through that together. So I suppose creating a rehearsal room, a rehearsal space in which difficult conversations can be had, but with sort of structure and care and compassion for one another was essential. I mean, first time round, we played a lot of volleyball to get a competitive spirit and a sort of that like visceral sort of muscular texture into the actors. And this time, because there was already an ensemble with the 10 company members who returned, it was actually about then delving deeper into the sort of bodily memories that we had from last time and explore what those choices meant in relation to one another.
One of the things, I mean, those of you who've seen it, you might remember that I think is so clever is the way that we, the audience, become complicit in a lot of these comments, because the first few scenes of the play are really funny.
Yeah.
And you find yourself reacting to one person and laughing along, and you're enjoying the jokes, and it's all of that, or it's just a laugh, and then the darkness comes in. So have you noticed that people are laughing at the same places as they did? Because that's the weird thing, isn't it? You know, that people's humour changes a bit. So I wondered if it feels the same where the laughs come. And
yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't know if the laughs have necessarily changed in sort of their position, but I do think what is essential about this play is it's never a lecture. It's never saying you are bad if you laugh at this, or you are wrong if you enjoy this character until they go, too far, or whatever that is. I think Roy, who's the playwright, Roy Williams, does this sort of remarkable thing of setting up a pub where conversations can be public or private, and then letting us sit in all of those conversations. And I think laughter in the theatre is such a sort of interesting thing. Anyway, you're not only laughing because it is actually funny. You could be laughing because it's awkward, or because it's brilliantly phrased, or something that's not been articulated before. But the play starts in a sort of joyful, humorous, upbeat place where I think the audience are actively invited to find their way into the play by laughing. And then gradually it peters out. But he does this remarkable thing where, it peters out as the play becomes darker, and then he'll come right in with another zinger. It never really makes a turn that is, and now you must all sit and be shocked by what we're gonna say. He's much sort of cleverer and more nuanced than that.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of it's a wonderful thing to have had 10 of the original back, but also that's sometimes quite complicated because it needs to be its new self, and you have new company members. So how, when you were first back in the rehearsal room, how did you all just go, well, hello, I haven't seen you for a while. I mean, how did you start to put it back together so that it felt fresh?
Well, on day one of the rehearsal process, I actually had COVID.
Excellent. So no director, it felt very fresh.
Absolutely, yeah. So we actually did our first day on Zoom, and the thing you'll notice about the show is a lot of it is sort of group chanting. And I don't know if you've done any group stuff on Zoom, but that's just a nightmare. So we did our first day on Zoom, which is unusual, but actually it was quite nice to sort of equalise. And it wasn't sort of 10 people who knew each other all hugging each other with 4 people on the sidelines. There was something actually about the Zoom space which meant that there was an equity or a newness for everyone, an unfamiliarity for everyone, which actually was quite useful. I wouldn't get COVID again on the first day of rehearsals, but it ended up being, actually a levelling of it. And then 2 days later I was no longer plague-ridden, and we were allowed into the room. And it was very much about never setting up a sort of old company, new company. We had a sort of rehearsal room video, which was very a performance video from last time, which was really useful. But the thing that became essential was that we could make new choices, and we weren't necessarily bound by what we found last time. You know, there were certainly things we wanted to preserve, but creating the space for new discovery was sort of essential.
That's really interesting. So how different is it? I mean, it's a revival, not a new production.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where would you say those moments of divergence have come?
I mean, the big difference is that we're in a different space, and we're in a theatre this time as opposed to the Spiegel tent that we were in last time. So actually, in terms of the sort of size of ideas in the play, they actually, I think, resonate really loudly in a theatre. There's something about the fact that, you know, we've taken out the first 2 rows here, so people are sort of looking in, like it's sort of a, you know, a bear pit or a... you know,
it was like saloon, isn't it? It's like a saloon.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of. There's a sense of sort of already a sense of sort of fight in the space, I think. So it was all new discovery, sort of spatially. And then I think something that I was really interested in this time around was making it feel conversational, so that the audience are looking into private moments rather than feeling like it's sort of being performed out. And the last time, the space sort of did that for us because it was small. I think we had a capacity of 120. Whereas this time we've had to think a little more actively about when people are being overheard, when people are obscuring what they're saying, when people are performing to the room. So I think that's sort of my big change this time, is thinking explicitly about who's hearing what, where, when and why.
Yes, so it's got to, yes, there's got to be a clarity of that.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I'm sure everybody agrees, it looks fantastic. I mean, it's amazing, particularly coming in. And there's a little trick with one of the props, a smoking cigarette, which will start smoking nearer the time, I believe. And already, Catherine has asked if she can play darts. You know, so that kind of community spirit that everybody is invited to stay. Because when I saw it on press night last time, I lost at table football to James Graham.
Oh, well, if you're going to lose to someone.
I know, I felt that was it. It was perfectly. But in terms of, you know, you've had a few previews now. Are you noticing that the audience is engaging with this, or are they slightly more timid because it is the theatre rather than the Spiegel tent, which did feel like a bar, really?
Yeah, it's funny. We serve drinks before the show and at the interval from the bar. So I suppose we actively invite people to interact with the space. And much like last time, there will be opportunities to play on the stuff. Yeah, I suppose the invitation has to be slightly louder because we're in a theatre. You know, we've got there's lots of video in it. We've now got a video which explicitly says, you know, the bar's open for you guys as well as for us, the company. So yeah, I suppose it's about setting out the rules and not assuming that people will know that becomes a real bar, but actually saying, come and have an interactive experience in the George. You'll see around the outside we've got pub seating. And so people can
I'm regretting it, frankly.
I know. It's the back. Yeah, so use the core. But yeah, you can sit. You've got choice this time round. You can sit in the pub on the seating around the side, or you can sit up in the theatre. And I suppose that is a good analogy for what the show's trying to do. We are a theatre play, but you can experience it in a way that is distinct and exciting and interactive as well.
Now, I mean, it's always a strange thing when it's a revival. But in fact, you are having quite a lot of press in, which is great that they're coming down. But you're dividing them up, aren't you, over many nights because of the train strike and all sorts of other things. Does that have any sort of effect? You know, because everybody in theatre is used to the idea that you do your previews and then it's the press night and then you're open. And there's the kind of a natural cadence in performance. So what does it mean when actually... I hope you're going to have a party, so you are going to be open.
Good. Yeah. We're going to be having an opening night party tomorrow night. But yeah, I mean, some particularly commercial theatres do their press night over sort of 3 nights. I think there's something quite nice about spreading it out because it means that actors and creative teams aren't sort of building it all up to one performance, which really matters and has to be the right one. Yeah. Actually, there is something about, you know, we've got press in, I think, every night this week, and there is something quite nice about actually saying, this is our show and it's consistent and it's good if you come on Monday, it's good if you come on a matinee on a Saturday. You know, it's a good show, and I think there is something quite sort of liberating about knowing that it doesn't all ride on one night in the press. You know, actually saying it could be one of many. I don't know if the actors feel the same as me, but
well, it's like the difference between doing exams and continual assessment, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. We are.
I preferred exams.
Yeah,
Needless to say. To return to the themes of the play, you said that it is very fundamentally about Englishness, and of course that is the case. But I also felt it was about, you know, terrible phrase, but it's used a lot now. It's about a certain sort of masculinity, but there are a couple of the really big characters are actually women in the play, and obviously I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but particularly the landlady. She is a hugely, you know, she's Britannia in a way, isn't she? In this. So, do you want to say a little bit about, in the rehearsal room, did you talk about that, about you know, the way the masculine roles and female roles and how they work together?
Yeah, it was. I don't think it was something that we sort of explicitly focused on, but so there's a change in this production. One of the football team has been rewritten to be a woman. She becomes Jess as opposed to Jason. And it's interesting thinking about what it means to change the gender of a character in what is a gendered space. You know, male football teams, male spaces. What people feel they can say when the other sex is absent. What it means to be in a sort of singularly one gendered space. And it is interesting. I mean, the 90s and early noughties was the sort of rise of ladette culture. We talked quite a lot about that for our character Jess, what it might mean as a woman to sort of assimilate or align oneself explicitly with a male football team. But you're spot on. Our landlady Gina sort of does rule this space. She is the authority figure in many ways. There's a great running line about people standing on stools and instantly being told to get down by Gina, and it feels like it's not a coincidence that Gina, you know, is like Regina, you know, queen of the space. There is a sort of textual nod to this space being ruled by a woman. But it is interesting because it is about maleness, and lots of the characters in the play have dated Gina, and there is a sense that her gender is essential to who she is and her ability to control the
Yeah, I mean, in a maybe more benign way, she's like Wendy to the Lost Boys. You know, that sort of central, pivotal figure, isn't she? Yeah. And of course, where, you know, you're staging this in the middle of what has been, you know, a long-fought campaign for women's football. But of course, what many of you might not know was that women's football used to be enormous. I mean, it was incredibly important. And the great Lily Parr, who in the 20s was this extraordinary figure. And because, of course, men were away at the war, during the First World War, many munitions factories and other factories had female football teams. And that's what everybody went to watch. And the Boxing Day match, I think it was in 1918, had, I mean, something like 45,000 people watching. And then the FA decided that wasn't on. And so they said that all the clubs were not allowed to let women play. And so they quite actively killed the game. But the first English women's football team have just all been given their caps, which happened a couple of days ago. So you are at the right moment for this, absolutely. I think. In terms of, you know, you've talked about this beautiful space, and I think we're all rather in love with it. Can you imagine this play continuing to be the play about Englishness, football, race, because it is still such a big topic within sport? You know, how hasn't it dated? And can you imagine it being superseded or being needed to be updated? You know, you put a woman in the team, but, you know.
It's a really interesting question. I mean, you know, as an eternal optimist, I'd like to hope that it makes itself. We manage as a society, as a nation, to make it outdated. You know, that's the hope, and it really is the hope. But I mean, there is something timeless about Roy's writing. You know, it's not only that he's dealing with these massive questions, but that his writing's really good and his dialogue's really funny and his characters are really well-rounded. And I don't think that sort of skill will ever, cease to be sort of remarkable to watch. I just hope that one day it might feel less like it's talking to us specifically in 2020, 2024, whatever year it happens. I hope so, but it certainly hasn't happened yet.
One of the things that's so extraordinary about his writing is that several of the characters, in a way, their rage and the way that they explode almost, at the drop of a hat, is partly because they can't express themselves and they're not articulate in the things that they're feeling or, It's very hard to write characters like that, but he pulled it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, inarticulacy on stage is a really interesting thing because it's not very interesting to watch people who don't have, great turns of phrase or whatever. There's a reason that poetry and good dialogue flourish on stages. But I think Roy's sort of remarkable choice is to have a cast of 14 characters, which is a really rare thing in theatre, particularly at the moment, which means that there are levels of sort of education and interest. There's comic foils, there's really well-read people, there are people who have an argument that they've thought about a lot and are now bringing to the pub. Actually, the sort of plurality of characters that Roy has created means that there can also be a spectrum of articulacy. One of the characters actually sort of acknowledges his inability to talk in a sort of real moment of self-knowledge that you don't really see anywhere else in the play. And it is sort of, it's remarkable how physical the play is. I think theatre can sometimes feel that it lives or dies by its words, but actually there's something in this play that the physical language and what we've worked on is so muscular and so sort of explicit that actually words become not a secondary language, but a different sort of language in this space. And there are two characters who have opposite views about race, about nationhood, and they are the sort of articulate characters, and they have a remarkable sort of showpiece moment. But not all characters need to do that. If you've got some characters who can do that, you can also populate the stage with other characters. But it's really interesting how inarticulacy is used in this play, and it's really exciting and sort of a voice and a character that you don't see represented and you don't see given sort of time and attention and care and maybe not compassion but sort of space maybe.
Well, it's an explanation that you don't often see, isn't
absolutely,
it?
Yeah.
So I would say there is a lot of compassion even for the people whose views Roy clearly doesn't agree with, but they're there all the same. So we started, you were the assistant director and now you're the director, and that's the big leap in directing, to be able to move from that. Does it feel wonderful to be back in Chai? How does it feel?
Oh, yeah, brilliant. It's sort of a dream come true to direct a show like this, with a company like this, the size of it, the sort of dramatic brilliance of it. It's quite rare to direct a play and be like, oh God, if only that bit was a little bit different. But actually with this play, there's none of that. The problem solving is sort of unnecessary because Roy's already solved all the text is just so glorious. The story is so sort of beautifully structured and constructed that, it's brilliant. It's amazing.
Jo, you've been fantastic. It's so lovely to have you back. We wish you all the best for the non-press night. So maybe we just wish you all the best for the party. Yep. But it's fabulous to have something that matters so much, this play here, when we have such a joyous and wonderful thing across the road. And that, of course, I would say, is the power of CFT. All things are possible. Ladies and gentlemen, Jo Bowman.